Welcome to Feed Your Wild, an immersive journey to help you remember your own medicine and awaken your intuitive healing gifts. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and join us for heart-centered, real conversations exploring intuition and spirituality, health and wellness, astrology, herbalism, and nature-based practices that will transform your health and life. Our mission is to inspire, empower you, and help you expand your spiritual and intuitive connection to its fullest expression so that we can build a more beautiful world together. Get ready to feed all parts of your wild self. Hey, welcome back to the Feed Your Wild podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Rodriguez, your intuitive nourishment guide today in every episode. And today we are doing a little exploration, an explorative journey, if you will, into this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And also just kind of weaving in the various meanings, expressions, and how they can show up for us, especially when it comes to intuitive guidance and your role as a healer, helper, change maker, and it whether or not your profession is in the healing arts. I talk about this a lot, but the healer does not mean the person who is the health practitioner and is healing the ailing person, right? The person that has the ailment or the disease. A healer is a human who really harnesses their own ability to self-heal and also assists others in amplifying, activating their ability to self-heal. That's how I see a healer. We tend to have those who are in our arts, the healing arts, or as a health practitioner, there's somewhere in our design, so to speak, to really be here as a servant to the healing of the collective. When I talk about servant and service, it's in its highest expression, right? So this is service from the heart. This is service that is transformative for the individual and for everybody. This is service that amplifies your ability to evolve, really, at the soul level. It's inner alchemy. And that's something that I think can be misconstrued when we start looking at all the ways that service work has really been taken advantage of and denigrated. And of course, so many people who have been in positions of service that feel more like servitude or enslavement, then that puts sort of this gnarly flavor to this concept of service, right? But it's part of my work. I know that one of the things that I am here to do, part of my purpose, is service. I mean, it's literally written even in my human design. I'm a right angle cross of service, one of them, and because there are a couple. And so coming into this understanding of what service really is for me has been not just a journey of, what is it that I'm here to, quote, do in terms of my professional life and my career, but it's more of a state of being. It's understanding how deeply woven it is in my purpose and my mission by simply existing, not by what I do, but who I am. And I encourage you to take that to heart and see what comes up when you allow that to stir in your heart. Because I know that if you're listening to this podcast, you most likely have a healer's heart. I can guarantee you that. And there's something that you are here to be in service of. Maybe you already know what that is. maybe you don't. Maybe you're on the path of discovery. Maybe it's shifting. Maybe you're shifting your relationship to service as well. So I am opening up this episode with this discussion because I feel like the path forward for the collective, and I have so much collective circuitry. I'm really here to speak to the collective, right? And my work is for the collective path and evolution. It's to wake up, become alive again, and remember how to bring heart back to service, and then service back into the heart. And through that, we see radical shifts and emergence. And this is the theme really of April and of spring in general. We are in springtime now here in the northern hemisphere, and April is astrologically this really emergent month. We had the eclipse season already that you and I and everybody experienced in various degrees. And, eclipse is really connecting to change, big change that might not have happened exactly on that day, but a seed was planted. A seed was planted for massive changes. And yet we can't quite pinpoint what they are. Maybe some have. And I've heard some pretty amazing stories already of people's experiences, and most of them, I'm not going to lie to you, most of them have been really challenging, and in the way that it's like a dark night of the soul, right? That eventually brings you to that path of emergence, to the new day, the dawn. And so tune into those whispers of change that maybe you don't see yet the fruits of it, but they are working their way upon you and reconfiguring within your life. And maybe you can feel it within your own being, within your body. And despite having the tangible evidence of any change, you know it's coming. And that brings us to this groundbreaking conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus. Very quickly, before we get into things and lost in the weeds of all this juiciness, I wanted to share that I have openings for Akashic Soul Record readings. And these are one-on-one private 60-minute readings where we access your Akashic records, connect with your guides, your angels, your highest self, and call in insightful information that is really here to support you in your path of becoming. And I feel that these moments where there are some really influential astrological things happening, these are some of the best times to dive into your records and to connect with information that helps support what is already at play, right? What's already happening, especially if you're having some challenges or difficulties in either discernment or just like the experience itself. And these have been really powerful and fruitful for so many of my clients and my students lately. So I wanted to make that available. I opened up more spots, but I am going to close off spots in the summertime because there's just other stuff going on. I'm going to be traveling potentially. So I wanted to make sure that you got in as soon as possible and to even process, integrate what has been coming up for you and what's been at play with spring, eclipse season, this upcoming conjunction, and just this month in general, which has been and continues to be really powerful. So if you're interested in some private readings, you can go over to wildlyrooted.com/Akashic Records. And there will be a link in the show notes as well if you would like to connect with me deeply in this one-on-one way for intuitive insights and Akashic readings. Okay, with that, let's get back into today's topic. So we have on April 20th coming up this really beautiful conjunction, which is an aspect that means Jupiter, the planets, Jupiter and Uranus, are coming together. And they come into a very close position with one another. That's called a conjunction, in the same degree or nearing the same degree in the astrological chart or wheel. And it can stir up quite a bit. So we're going to explore that today. And I'm also going to share a lot of personal stuff actually today. We'll see how personal, how deep I actually go. I have it in my outline, and the way that I roll is, I sort of pre-plan, rough sketch, outline, and then I just go. And a lot of times I don't even follow the outline, or I go off on tangents and then come back. So we'll see how much I share. But I feel that anchoring this energy in a lot of these types of events that can seem like so abstract and esoteric, and really grounding them into a real life experience or a real life event, which I'll share as well, that's more according to mundane astrology, which looks at collective events like wars or things like that, right? Whereas when we look more from a archetypal, more of a modern perspective of astrology, then we can look at how these various archetypes of the planets play out in our lives. So we're in this rebirth portal. I mean, I really feel that solar eclipse in Aries really is a portal for self-realization, for rebirth, really phoenix energy here. And really returning to claim what is yours in this life and who you were born to be. And those are also some themes when it comes to Jupiter and Uranus. There's a lot of rebellious energy that I'll get into here, but I feel that there's so much momentum, especially with so many planets and energy in this corner of the chart and in Aries, which is really the I am. That's those are the words for Aries, right? I am. And the first sign of the astrological year, the pioneer, and ablaze with fire, right? So this energy is amplified, I believe, with this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus on April 20th, which we will feel before and after. So we're already feeling it. We've already been feeling it, so to speak, since I would say the end of March, and we're going to feel it into maybe mid-May in terms of its amplification. But of course, the consequences of it, or the side benefits or effects of it, will be longer lasting. We are still in the Mercury retrograde period, and this was a major part of the solar eclipse in Aries. It continues to be, and Mercury retrograde is in Aries. So again, a lot of that Aries energy inspiring us to lead and take action and embrace that pioneering spirit, but making sure that we're not being impulsive and we're mitigating the fiery tongue of our communication still, at least until, we get a little bit more clearance when Mercury goes direct. So for now, again, I mentioned this before, but in previous episodes, now is not the best time to really push or make demands I don't think it's really any optimal time any time is optimal to really push for change. There's a level of motivation, right? And energy, like an impulse to make something happen. But for so many of us, myself absolutely included, the more we push for something to change, the more we get pushed back. It's really when, especially if you have a design like mine, I'm a manifesting generator, or generators or projectors, or reflectors even, where we're not meant to really push and initiate all the time. Actually, we're meant to kind of wait and respond in the best way that it is for our design. And the more that we can sink into that, the more that things just really open up and flow. And my experience with Mercury retrograde is really it's a reminder of that, right? And kind of just letting go of the wheel a little bit and not jumping to conclusions, not jumping to deliver the message, right? Because especially with this Mercury retrograde in Aries, it's like there's the possibility of giving mixed messages, of upsetting people when you didn't really mean to, and jumping to conclusions in general. And of course, all of the practical stuff like not backing up your files or things with data happening. So we just want to do our best to mitigate all of that and have some sort of Mercury retrograde maintenance protocol whenever it happens, because it happens regularly, right? It's not like it's the end of the world. Okay, so now, I mentioned that we have the event of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and this is happening at 21 degrees of the fixed Earth sign, Taurus. And just as a quick overview, this really is inspiring a whole new cycle of breakthroughs and innovation, and I would say spiritual breakthroughs and innovation, as well as surprising financial stuff that happens, and also relationship changes. This really depends on where it's hitting in your chart, but let's go over what each of the planets brings in terms of their themes and energy, and then what that can look like when they hit it up together and in Taurus. As I mentioned, we have probably been feeling this since the end of March, really, and we'll be feeling it after April 20th through May, and it's feeling like it's kind of an ignition point or a spark for what's to follow. So who is this going to really impact? Well, the collective. But if you take a look at your natal chart, if you have any planets that are in or around 21 degrees of Taurus. Now, the orb, that means like the influence of the energetics of this event, is 3 degrees either way about. So 18 to 23 degrees of Taurus in your chart. And if you have an emphasis in Taurus in whatever way, whatever that means for you in that area, so any planets that are in a range in fixed signs as well, so Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, of course. And again, if you have any other, like what an emphasis might be your MC or your AC, so any of the angles that are around that point. Also, if you have a natal aspect in your own chart between Jupiter and Uranus, so like an opposition, especially a conjunction, if you have a conjunction in your chart with Jupiter-Uranus, then you'll be feeling it more strongly. And I'm going to later share a little bit of my experience having a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. It's not exact, but it's pretty close. And just give you a sense of my life experience with that in my own chart. But obviously it's going to be expressed so differently. And with Uranus is like the total unexpected. So we can't really plan or prophecy exactly what it might be. But overall, this is viewed as pretty positive. Now, Jupiter and Uranus make a conjunction every about 13, 14 years. So it's not like it's super, super rare. It is pretty rare. But we don't see this happening in Taurus very often. The last time it happened in Taurus was 1941. That was at 25 degrees of Taurus. So I'll talk about that a little bit. That was during World War II. And when it comes to the planets themselves, we have Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of philosophy, of expansion, of abundance. Jupiter focuses on strengthening the self, the supreme self, who's reflected within each individual spirit. And Jupiter is considered a benefic, meaning that it brings us good things or things that we like in this world, right? Jupiter is associated with growth and the principle of generation or regeneration. So this very much in connection with the movement that the soul takes toward fulfilling its destiny and achieving its purpose. This is why it's so connected to the philosopher, the teacher, the saint. And when I mention abundance, it's not just financial abundance, monetary abundance, but it's spiritual abundance as well as material abundance. In Vedic astrology, Jupiter is known as Guru, which is really great teacher. And in classical Western astrology, Jupiter is the lord of the mystics, of priests, of clergy, and all kinds of other religious figures. So there is generally kind of, if you want to say, spiritual authority or emphasis around people with a lot of Jupiter energy or strong Jupiter placements. What's also interesting to note is that according to classical astrology, Jupiter is associated with structures and order and establishments, as well as the people who manage them. And typically in modern astrology, we consider that to be in the realm of Saturn. But in classical astrology, Jupiter is the one that is really associated with those things and the building of foundation of your life that is rooted in spirit. Jupiter also rules institutions. So this is where we can get the, quote, shadow side of Jupiter, which is dogma, right? And dogmatic teachings, hierarchical structure in teachings that are not in the highest service to everybody that is within that system. And so in this way, when you look at classical authors writing about Jupiter, they're connecting Jupiter with organized religion and corporations and empire. All of which, by the way, are very expansive, right? Not like, it doesn't mean that it may necessarily be in a good, quote, good way. And I think that that's something that kind of gets a little muddy, is one's moral compass or perspective on these things when we're really looking at a really large overview of the evolution of humanity, that some of these things that we considered, quote, bad were actually necessary components of the evolution of humankind, right? And our individuated selves and understanding, so that we can come back and look at, oh, wait a minute, here are some things that maybe we got kind of wrong along the way, right? Or maybe there was too much expansion, because too much growth, too much expansion. I mean, obviously, when we look at tumors or even glands, if there's just too much growth, that is not healthy for the organism either. So that's a little bit about Jupiter. With Uranus, Uranus is rebellious. It's the planet of rebellion and change and unpredictability, unexpected events. Uranus wants sudden change and revolution, wants things to happen quickly. But Uranus is also like, we can't quite see or know. This was one of the first planets beyond the 7 that we can see. And so Uranus brings this sort of unexpected shift and change that we can never quite point our finger on until it actually happens. Now, this is happening in the sign of Taurus, and Taurus is a fixed sign that wants to go slow and steady. Taurus doesn't like to be rushed. If you know any really strong Taurian people, they have their way and they take their time. They have their unique pace. It's not that they can't go fast. I know many Taurians who can go really fast, but it's in their own way, in their own pace. And if you try to make them shift directions quickly, it usually does not happen, right? So there could be some stubbornness there. So this is an interesting energetic pairing of Jupiter-Uranus inside of Taurus. We can look back at the early 1940s to get a sense of what was going on there energetically, what might be we reliving since that period, and really needing to reorient or up-level in terms of our collective understanding and looking at our relationship with Earth and the material realm, including resources, agriculture, money, food. So when we look at natural resources, we can connect this with minerals and, as I mentioned, agriculture and food, iron, gold, these natural elements that we might see something going on with those, right? With a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. We can also, of course, look at the financial markets and resources. There might be amplification of change, so like fluctuation, maybe big losses, maybe big gains, maybe a certain event that really impacts the financial markets. That's what really happened with World War II in 1941. There were, of course, ramifications of any war that really causes issues within the financial markets and the economy globally. But we can also see specific events that occurred that impacted the market. With Uranus, there's also these unexpected or explosive breakthroughs and future vision, futuristic change. So a sudden shift, and you might experience this in your own life, a sudden shift in what it is that you own or you have, possess in your environment, what matters to you in life, especially in the particular area of your life that this is hitting. When we look back again in the early 1940s, this was also when the implementation of the 40-hour work week, along with overtime pay, was established nationally. And this was something that was actually seen as a good thing, although now we're like, 40-hour work week, F that, right? Like, give us the 4-hour work week, or at least the 4-day work week. But this was seen as something really good because there was a set limit with what full-time is considered. And then you get paid any time over that or beyond that, which previous to that was not the case. And also the last time that we had, and I heard this from the astrology podcast. I can't remember who mentioned it on the astrology podcast, but I remember hearing those quite a while ago. Last time we had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in a Venus-ruled sign. So Taurus, of course, is ruled by Venus. So is Libra. That was in the early 1970s. And what did we get in the early 1970s? There was a ton of really great music. It was sort of like this musical renaissance happening at that time. Wonderful for art. Venus, of course, is the sign or the planet connected to the arts. and beauty. But there's also lots of political movements at that time too. And I feel like we are going to see that here. I feel like whenever you have Uranus within our current governmental structure, you're going to see, especially with Jupiter, as I mentioned, in connection with institutions, you're going to see political stuff happening. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that we also have the upcoming elections in the United States later this year. It's going to be really interesting to watch. Now, I think it's important when we're considering these energies is to bring ourselves back to ground zero, back into ourselves, our bodies, our hearts, into the present moment, because we really only have the now, right? That's the past is no longer in existence. The future has not come to be yet. Although if you want to go beyond time, space, continuum, like into the Akasha, where we are in all time, that's a different story, right? But here with our more linear brains and minds, and then we have linear time, we have the now. We only have the now. So I think this is really about getting clear on what it would be to live your life fully in the present moment, and looking at the opportunities and the invitations to deprogram yourself with Jupiter and Uranus. I mean, this is like, get yourself out of the conditioning. This is about future living, but in the now. So how do you want to live and be? Who do you want to be? Or who do you feel like you are, but you haven't lived to your fullest expression? That's what this energy is really supporting and bringing. And, there can be certain events that kind of like course correct and bring more of that in your life, that are events that are outside of your control. For example, I've seen breakups, I've seen deaths in the family, I've seen promotions and financial windfalls. So a lot of those things can happen, and they do, but not always. It could be more of an internal process, right? Sort of this awakening process, this seed that is planted. So this really, I think, has to do, when we look at the practicality with it, with Taurus, what do I need to change in terms of my habits, who I choose to be literally in every single moment? Because we have to check ourselves in every single moment, right? And also, what do I need to change in terms of my resourcing and my finances and my relationship to the material realm? Maybe it's with food. Maybe it's with your relationship with plants and the earth. So looking at any blocks or limitations with any and all of that, and beginning to decondition yourself. And I think that, this is part of a larger remembering, right? Because we are conditioned since birth, even before birth, right? We come in with sort of this genetic predisposition, and with epigenetics, with our transgenerational issues that we're carrying, with past life residues and karmic bonds. So there's a lot that we are already born into and with that we could still address. We could still unwind, so to speak. And I think that this energy, every time we have various events, astrological events, that are really supportive for that. You could say all of them are, right? But I would say that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is one of those that's kind of like a boop, like a spark that kind of just lights up something and then forever changes you. And whether or not that event is long lasting, I don't think is really the point. But I think the point is, what do you do with it? What do you do with that? So this conjunction can open you up to higher frequencies. When we're looking at Jupiter and Jupiter's connection with like mysticism in the higher realms, and Uranus is really sort of this like futuristic energy, what are you ready to experience and call into your life and create? And you might find that there are synchronicities, things that match you up with things that are in alignment with this higher version of yourself in your life. I know that all week I've been experiencing massive synchronicities, and it's nothing that is like huge, big, life-changing in the moment things, but they are juicy seeds for, I know that they're all going to come together in a really beautiful way, but it's like this slow growing vine, so to speak, that eventually is going to bear fruit. This energy of Jupiter and Uranus, the conjunction, wherever it falls in your chart, also feels like it's asking you to become more aligned with your ability to think for yourself. Right? And that's part of that deconditioning process. But especially your ability to think outside of the box, to be different, and to be unapologetic about that, and to get that independent self-knowledge and self-awareness and boldly take it by the reins and ride with it, act on it. That this is part of the breakthrough that's going to come through, because it's not like, the events come and all of a sudden the breakthrough happens for you. Maybe for some people that does, but it really has to do with how you show up to life in response to these energies, right? Because you are an active participant, it requires your will. So really consider that. Now, I want to chat a little bit about like if you have a Jupiter-Uranus aspect in your chart. I'm going to talk mostly about the conjunction because that's what I'm most familiar with in my own chart. But I also want to talk about other people who've had Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, just to kind of give you, and events, to give you a sense of this energy again. So the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is this cycle that began McDonald's, Mary Poppins, M&Ms, Apple computers, and the World Wide Web. So let's just take a look at a couple of these. We have Steve Jobs, of course. He was a Jupiter-Uranus native, which means he had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the sign of Cancer for him. And in 1997, during another Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, he revealed his ad campaign that was all about think different. You guys remember that one? Think different, 1997. And that was something that really was novel, right? And I think it's so perfectly aligns with this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, in addition to just Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, right? Like this guy who had this conjunction brought Apple into being. And then we had the World Wide Web, which was created by Tim Berners-Lee, and he had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Cancer. And there was also Astro.com. Astro.com was started during a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Now, Astro.com is the OG astrology website that most people use when they're first starting out. I think every person I know who's into astrology who got started, most of them started off with Astro.com and really supported this up-and-coming wave of astrologers, of new astrologers or astrology enthusiasts like myself. I don't consider myself an astrologer. I consider myself an enthusiast. But it's when you look at these through lines, Apple, Astro.com, the World Wide Web, McDonald's, M&Ms, these began a cultural wave, right? So there's themes here of tech innovations, technology innovations, major theme with this conjunction, but also a cultural wave or a turning of tide, a breaking of dawn. So when we look at Jupiter really coming in and opening the window, right? Like the light breaks open. We have inspiration, we have hope, we have enthusiasm. And it's something that is really expansive for us. We also have a cycle of inspiration. So the beginning of something that can start to provide us with a new vision, a new way of looking at things. And again, through that, a breakthrough. And again, I mentioned this as being a seeding period that can take time to gestate, but what I have seen for a lot of people is that, and I mean, I think historically, collectively as well, that this can be a breakthrough in karmic patterns. So for those who have Jupiter forming a conjunction to Uranus in the birth chart, there is almost this natural connection with your intuition and trusting your visions, having visionary qualities and trusting those and acting on inspiration. There's definitely this kind of optimistic energy. It doesn't mean that you might characterize a person as an optimist, but in the way that they move through life, there's an optimistic stream, if you will. And there's also this instinctual welcome of change and rebellion and innovation. Like status quo is not the thing for this conjunction native. And you want to improve things. You want to grow. You want to develop. And so looking at new methods and innovative ways of making things better and having faith in the future. And and you are also okay with not being in step with others, right? Because sometimes, when you're out of the box, you're out of the box, right? You could be even considered a black sheep. So with this, I really connect this conjunction with the 5 line in human design, which is the heretic. The 5 line is the heretic. The 5 line is the line that can see beyond, just beyond what others can see. And they bring that forth, but then they got a ton of projections from people, right? You're my savior, or you're the devil. And you were supposed to save me, but you didn't. I hate you. And so we see this kind of energy with a lot of people that have this conjunction. And I wonder, so I don't know the nuances and the nitty gritty of like how the 5 line might come to be in terms of the way that we have our, the planets laid out in our chart, so to speak. I would guess that there's emphasis on Jupiter and Uranus within one's chart if you have a 5 line. I have a 5, I'm a 3-5 in human design. So that might be something that's interesting to look at for yourself if you have a 5 in your chart or in your human design. And if you don't know what I'm talking about with human design, by the way, by now, like if you're a new listener, because I talk about it all the time, I'll make sure to have an episode linked below that I had it with Jazz Nena. And at the time, she went by Jazz Moon. And she is a human design reader, but she has since started Era Society for entrepreneurs. And it's a beautiful company. But we did an awesome episode all on human design. So if you want to get the basics and get started, listen to that episode that I'll link below. There's also this thing with freedom. Freedom with those with this conjunction. And I think especially with just like strong Jupiter and Uranus placements in general. But freedom is everything. I know that's true for myself. I'll get more into that in just a moment. But there is something here about not being bogged down or oppressed by rules or even like worldviews, ideas, beliefs, opinions of others. There can be a lot of unconventionality with your ideas, with your beliefs, with your worldviews, and they might change too. And that's okay. So there's something about being true to your individuality and your authenticity, which means that you're often going to break away from the norm. You're going to go against the grain, so to speak, in a lot of different ways. So authenticity is everything to you, even if it feels hard to do so. It's almost like you have to be yourself. And maybe that takes some time. Maybe there's a lot of conditioning when you were younger, but it was so painful. And now it's really coming into like a point in your life where you're like, I have no other option but to be myself, right? And it could be really challenging for you to accept any kind of restrictions, especially like any restriction around being spontaneous or expressing your freedom in some way. So here's just a quickie overview of the highlights of traits that I would say with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that can kind of color or flavor, give you this sense of the flavor of what this conjunction might feel like for you in the area of your life that it's showing up. Unusual, unconventional, forward-thinking, unexpected, right? And maybe some freedom, an opening, free spirit, and intuitive, something that comes in that really opens up your intuition and your visionary self, and prophetic tendencies. Even though we can't necessarily know what's to come, there's still a sense, like a felt sense of knowing that is more, that's beyond the mind, right? That's beyond logic. There's a lot more to say in terms of, if this conjunction is poorly aspected or not. And I'm not going to get into the nuances, all of that, because I think that's better left to an astrologer who can really go into the weeds on this stuff. But if you have a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in your chart, and it's relatively well integrated and well aspected, as in like, in your chart, there aren't a ton of harsh aspects or things that are happening with that conjunction, then there's something that opens up. And that is an ability to examine your belief system and collective belief systems in a really objective and cool-headed manner. And maybe even sometimes making it like beyond just an interest or a hobby, but making a career out of an analysis of that, of whether it's faith, spirituality, ideology, religion, or anything in connection with faith and doubt. You're probably no stranger to experiencing certain shocks during different periods of your life with this. I myself have experienced that 100%. And even though your basic philosophy or ideologic outlook may have experienced those cracks or those shocks, you could still maintain faith. And it's like you keep going. It's not this experience where you just wash your hands of exploring those themes. But it's also not to say that you don't ever experience doubt. And what I find really beautiful, the late theologian Paul Tillich has said, doubt is not the opposite of faith. It is one element of faith. And I talk about doubt as this guardian of a threshold. It's one of the guardians of the threshold of our becoming, of our growth, of our spiritual evolution. We must meet doubt at the gate. And we have to face doubt and move through the threshold, meaning integrating that doubt and maintaining faith despite that feeling or sense of doubt. And I think that is another component of those who have a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and sort of that feeling anyway of an event that happens, or the way that you might be experiencing the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is it's almost like this renewed sense of faith in something. And that is part of that, that new wave that I was talking about before. Okay, so as a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction native myself, I have it in my first house. And what I could say is all of the above in terms of the freedom, being a free spirit, being kind of the odd one, in my family, in my friend circles. It's not that I, wasn't unpopular or even like super popular. There wasn't anything really obvious with that, but it was just like I felt like I was different most of the time. And I tend to have ideas, or my worldview and my way of thinking of things is not conventional, and it's not what I would say in keeping with a lot of my family, my extended family members, and just in general, I think in society. I mean, here I am. I always talk about waving your spiritual freak flag, right? Like coming out of the spiritual closet. And as a clinical nutritionist, who I've had also many careers prior to that, which someday I'll talk about, but right now we're not going to get into that, turned intuitive healer and Akashic record channeler and teacher of this work, I can tell you that I don't think that if it wasn't for this placement, and also I'm a Sagittarius rising and Aquarius moon, those kind of go along with it because Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Uranus rules Aquarius, which in modern astrology, Uranus rules Aquarius. So like I have it in me to be the unconventional one, to be a free spirit. I'm the only one in my family that isn't married, right? That I've chosen not to do that. It's not because I have any bad feelings about marriage. I've questioned the institution of marriage within the more modern Western world, but I'm not opposed to it. It just literally never occurred to me to get married. I never had dreams of a wedding or anything like that, despite having a pretty regular upbringing, my parents being married, my grandparents being married, seeing that, my siblings getting married. And that's just an example, I think, that is kind of obvious. That has been my own experience. I will share one last experience I had of a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And this is really personal, so I'm putting it out there for you, but I think it's something that it really does paint the picture of what this kind of conjunction can bring. And this happened in the sign of Aries in the summer of 2010. So it happened in June of 2010. And it happened in my fifth house. So fifth house is connected to creativity, children, romance, sex, self-expression. And so this would be breakthroughs or realizations in that realm. So I'll set the scene. January of 2010 was the month that my mom, Norma, passed away. So she crossed over in January 2010. That also then led to the breakup of myself and my long-term boyfriend at the time, who I quite frankly thought was my soulmate, and I was going to be with him for the rest of my life. I'm not going to get into those elements, but I had a major breakdown of, like, in multiple areas of my life, major losses, right? I went into a period of deep spiritual exploration, inner work, grieving, obviously, and celibacy. So my boyfriend was actually across the pond, as they say. He was in England. at the time and had been for some time because he was studying there. And so I had this long period of celibacy chosen. And it was 6 months, so June of 2010, so 6 months after the death of my mom and that major breakup with my boyfriend at that time, I had this like summer of totally unexpected, explosive fun. And you can imagine, I mean, I was pretty depressed during the months following January, but something happened in June. And June is also my birth month. So that's another component to it. But this conjunction, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happening in my 5th house, I also, by the way, started to take some metalsmithing classes, and I made my first pieces of jewelry. So I made my first ring at that time, and I still have that, and I love it. So there you go with like creativity. But I started to date and have so much fun with these synchronistic, totally unexpected partnerships, brief partnerships that I had with people. That was totally life-giving and fun and exactly what I needed. And mind you, I had been in a relationship, I think it was like 6 years prior to that. I didn't ever have a period of my life prior to that where I had a lot of fun with dating multiple people or going out all the time. I'm a very monogamous type of person. And so this was totally unexpected, and I would say definitely a turning of tide for me at that time. So without getting into the specifics, because then this would turn into a different kind of podcast episode, I just have to say that, this, in addition to it being my birth year, so like a shift in kind of the theme of my life in that time, it was also this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Aries that activated my own Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in another fire sign in Sagittarius that really amplified things and brought a lot of fire to that area of my life. So now we're looking at Jupiter-Uranus happening in Taurus. So where is that in your chart? Take a look at some of the other aspects. Go back and listen to the beginning of this episode. Tune into, are there any other planetary placements or signs or things like that that would indicate that you might experience this a little bit more this round? And what area of your life, what house does Taurus rule? And that'll give you a little sense into what might be going on for you come April 20th and beyond. I would love, love, love to know if you have a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction or any kind of aspect that is within your natal chart, or if you know that you're going to be experiencing this pretty strongly. I'd love to hear how this shows up for you. Again, if you're interested in joining our community, it has not launched yet. I'm building up a sign-up list, a wait list, to see if there are actually people who are interested in this, and just to make sure that we are co-creating something together that is going to be really beautiful. So if you want to connect with other like-hearted healers, chat about the Future Wild episodes, chat about astrology, and tune into additional Akashic channelings and access exclusive content that isn't going to be anywhere else, then raise your hand by signing up for our waitlist to grab your spot and learn more. And if you would like support during these emergent times, I highly recommend booking an Akashic Soul Record session with me. I'm going to be closing them in the summertime, so there's going to be just a few spots for the springtime, and these are deep intuitive channelings that are one-on-one. You get to ask specific questions about your life, about your path, and They're one of my favorite things to do. I would love, love, love to support you in this way. You can go to wildlyrooted.com/Akashic Records to learn more, or click the link in the show notes. By the way, the sign-up page for the community is wildlyrooted.com/community. So if you wanted to raise your hand for that, you could click the link in the show notes and go there. I'm sending you all my love. Big, big hugs. Cannot wait to hear how all of this pans out for you. Remember, over time, it's not necessarily a major event that's going to happen in April only. But tune into the frequencies of what's shifting for you. I would love to know. And I will connect back with you next week when we have our next episode on this full moon in Scorpio and our podcast anniversary episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this supportive in any way, please share it out with your friends, loved ones, and subscribe and rate and review. It helps us so much to stay on air and to reach more people. All my love. Be well.